Well, you guys, it's been a long week, and I've been anxious and ready to do the second episode of the Holland Impact for you guys. My name is Christian Holland. I'm your host, and I am just ecstatic about this new episode. So thank you for being with me today. So, welcome back to the Holland Impact this week. I'm going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite movies, and it came out I think it was July. This is an episode about Oppenheimer. So, I'm just going to put this out there and say if you're not a huge fan of history or learning about history, or if history just makes you tune out, I would just probably skip this podcast. But I would really hope that you would stick around and listen, because this movie means a crap load to me. And I'm going to be explaining some of my favorite moments from the movie and why you need to watch this, even if you need to run it through VidAngel, because there are some things in this movie that you might not want to see. So, also, this episode contains spoilers for the movie if you haven't seen it already. So, take that as your warning. So, if you've never seen it before, the film itself is out of chronological order, meaning that the timeline is all jumbled together, so it's hard to follow, especially if you've never watched a Christopher Nolan film before. And also, if you don't know who Christopher Nolan is by name, he's made some of your favorite movies like Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, The Prestige, Inception, Interstellar, Memento, Tenet, and more recently Oppenheimer. And Christopher Nolan loves to make films where the sequence of events are out of order, and therefore making the movie more interesting. So there is so much jam-packed into this 3-hour behemoth of a film. So I'm going to try to summarize the most important parts of the film before I talk about some of my favorite moments from the movie and why you need to watch it. So here we go. So J. Robert Oppenheimer is a theoretical physicist who is credited as the father of the atomic bomb. After accepting teaching positions at the University of California and the California Institute of Technology located in Pasadena, California, he becomes increasingly tied up in the communist movement at the University of California. Although never becoming an official member of the Communist Party, he still had ties, including a relationship he had with a woman named Jean Tatlock, played by Florence Pugh in the movie, and Oppenheimer's brother Frank. They were both communists, and while Oppenheimer himself, Robert Oppenheimer, was never a communist, these ties to communism would haunt him for the rest of his life. Oppenheimer is recruited to be the director of the Manhattan Project Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico to develop the first atomic bombs to be used in warfare against Germany. However, once Germany surrenders, the scientists group together and wonder if the ends justify the means, if they should still develop the atomic bomb. However, Oppenheimer believes that using the atomic bomb on Japan would end the Pacific War and therefore save lives. So they test the bomb, codenamed the Trinity test, and it's a success. And then after that, President Truman orders the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After the bombing, Oppenheimer meets with President Truman to discuss a potential nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union. And in that meeting with the president, Oppenheimer expresses his somber belief that he has blood on his hands, which leads President Truman to call him a crybaby. though that is up for historical debate. Oppenheimer becomes an advisor to what's known as the United States Atomic Energy Commission, also called the AEC for short. While one of the scientists that was working on the atomic bomb with Oppenheimer proposes a hydrogen bomb, which would be 10 times as powerful than a single atomic bomb, Oppenheimer openly rejects and takes a negative stance against the developing of a hydrogen bomb, and that generates controversy. It is at this point that the AEC chairman named Louis Strauss, played by the great Robert Downey Jr., enters the scene. So Louis Strauss resents Dr. Oppenheimer because Oppenheimer has a bit of an ego. He thinks he's all that, even though he's haunted by his qualms about the atomic bomb. So Oppenheimer publicly humiliated Louis Strauss about atomic affairs. And also, when Louis Strauss invited Dr. Oppenheimer to be the director of the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, Louis Strauss thinks that Oppenheimer had a conversation with Einstein about Louis Strauss, and you just gotta see the movie to watch this, because Louis Strauss is watching from a distance as Oppenheimer is chatting it up with Einstein, and when Strauss walks up to Einstein to greet him, he's like, "Albert," but Einstein doesn't even spare him a passing glance. So the entire movie, you're spent wondering, what did Oppenheimer say to Einstein? Why did Einstein not look at Strauss? So because of Strauss' petty ego, he thinks that the conversation automatically had to be about him. And so because of this, he believes that Oppenheimer is manipulating the atomic scientists against him, and therefore wants revenge against Oppenheimer. And Louis Strauss eventually gets his revenge. So the sneaky Strauss secretly orchestrates a private security hearing before a security board, which concerns Oppenheimer's Q clearance. Now, a Q clearance is a pass required to access top secret information, only found like within the government. Yeah. So as this security board hearing is going on, it becomes crystal clear that this is a kangaroo court with a predetermined outcome. And they dig up Oppenheimer's past communist ties, and they bring forth the scientists that have worked with Dr. Oppenheimer at Los Alamos, and many of them stab Oppenheimer in the back and testify against him. And even Edward Teller, who is the scientist who's credited as the father of the hydrogen bomb, which was the bomb that was proposed that was 10 times powerful than a nuclear, the atomic bomb. I'm sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought. So eventually, the board revokes Oppenheimer's clearance, which damages his image to the public and also limiting his influence on nuclear policy. But in the end, the scientists are the ones who get the last laugh, because Dr. David Hill, who's played by Rami Malek, and you've seen him in movies such as Night at the Museum as King Akhmen-Ra, the Egyptian pharaoh. And you've also seen him, if you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, he is the actor who plays Freddie Mercury. So Rami Malek as Dr. David Hill testifies about Strauss's personal motives in the Oppenheimer downfall, which results in Louis Strauss' political influence being destroyed. So, if the movie were really in chronological order, this is when the movie would officially end, with both Louis Strauss and Oppenheimer having their political and scientific reputations left in ruins. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Christian, why would you recommend this movie to us? It sounds haunting and depressing. And I don't know what else to tell you. Like it's a heavy movie to watch, and it's a long movie to watch. At 3 hours long, I don't know if I could have handled it the first time I watched it, but I don't think it's like haunting, like horror haunting. I think it's haunting in like a contemplative manner because it makes you think. It makes you think about actions, it makes you think about consequences to those actions. It makes you think what it would have been like to have lived at the time of the developing of the atomic bomb and its aftermath. But I think there are a few lessons to be learned from this movie. But I think you would need to watch the movie yourself to find out what those lessons are. Right now, I would love to take just a few minutes to wrap up the episode with what my favorite moments from the movie are. So, the first scene that I want to talk about, it's a masterpiece. It is probably one of the most overplayed soundtrack pieces in my apartment. It's probably the scene that I go back to all the time whenever I watch the movie. And I can only describe it as the "can you hear the music" scene. And you'll understand that in a second. So, within 4-ish minutes of the movie, sorry, man. I don't know what happened there. But anyway, within 4-ish minutes of the movie, we are transported back to the 1920s, I think. 1924 through 1928-ish. And we meet Oppenheimer when he is in post-grad school at Cambridge University. When reading the book, which the movie is based on, the book is called American Prometheus. And you find out that Oppenheimer was increasingly mentally depressed, deeply disturbed, and troubled by what he says in the film, troubled by visions of a hidden universe. We are given a glimpse into Oppenheimer's imaginings. Subatomic particles rushing through empty space, freezing in time, neutrons whipping around within the infinite capacities of this man's mind. And while this is up for debate, Oppenheimer is shown to have injected a green apple with potassium cyanide and left it on his tutor Patrick Blackett's desk. Only minutes later, we are whisked back into the laboratory where Oppenheimer left the apple as it's about to be eaten by one of Oppenheimer's heroes, the physicist named Niels Bohr, played by the great Kenneth Branagh, who starred in movies such as Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, as well as J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and The Chamber of Secrets. Now, this is one of my favorite, this is probably my favorite movie in the film, because you see something Dr. Bohr says to Oppenheimer, which lifts him out of his mental stupor. Oppenheimer rips the apple out of Bohr's hand and throws it in the trash, and Bohr, not showing a hint of confusion or anger, switches subjects and asks him, "How's your mathematics?" To which Patrick Blackett, who's listening into the conversation, says, "It's not good enough for the physicist he wants to be." So then Bohr turns back to Oppenheimer and says, "Algebra is like sheet music. The important thing isn't can you read the music, it's can you hear it. Can you hear the music, Robert?" To which Oppenheimer answers enthusiastically, "Yes, I can." Now, at this point in the episode, I need you all to do me a favor. Really, you're doing yourselves a favor. Pause the episode right now. Get on whatever app you use for music, be it Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. Pause the podcast and listen to Ludwig Göransson's track called Can You Hear the Music from the Oppenheimer soundtrack. There are not words to describe how magical and thought provoking this track is. It's just under 2 minutes long. At a minute and 50 seconds, Göransson wanted to convey the energy, the magnificence, the scope of Oppenheimer's drive for excellence in the world of physics. So, in this barely 2 minute song, he employed 21 tempo changes. Those of you who know anything about music and tempo, I know how how difficult changing the tempo is, especially 21 times in just under 2 minutes. The song was recorded live, meaning the musicians were recorded, like the song was recorded as they were playing it, like in real time. The musicians had to go fast, slow again, play faster, then faster, then faster to the end of the song. So I want you to do something while you listen to it. Close your eyes and try your best to imagine what might be happening in the movie as the song is playing. So go ahead and pause it and then listen to the song and then come back and listen to the rest of the podcast. Wow. Wasn't that just amazing? I'm trying to be like really awkward for those of you who just stayed on and like, no, I'm not gonna pause it and go listen to the whatever song that you wanted me to listen to. So I'm just gonna go through it. But anyway, I'm just having fun with you guys. Anyway, moving on. The second scene that I just love to go back and rewatch. I actually had one of my friends over last week to watch Oppenheimer. This was his first time watching it. And when we got to the Trinity test scene where they tested the first atomic bomb that they had built, he was just like, "Can we watch it again?" Anyway, because we had split it up over 2 nights. We watched the first hour and a half, the first one night, and then the following night we were like, all right, let's finish it. So when he came back, he was like, "Can we watch the Trinity test scene again?" So anyway, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this right now, shout out to my friend Isaac. So anyway, so I'm going to be talking about the Trinity test scene. Now, the Trinity test scene happens after the first hour and a half of the film. So you gotta like plow through a bunch of context and backstory and chatting and sitting around talking, walking and talking, standing up and then sitting down for more talking until you get to this glorious, painstakingly eerie, anxiety-inducing scene. And so the movie is one part, but the music is like 99% of the anxiety. If you go to Ludwig Göransson's soundtrack to the movie Oppenheimer, there are 2 tracks that appear back to back. The first is Ground Zero, and the second is just called Trinity. So Ground Zero plays when they are wrapping up the like planning for the test. They're raising the gadget, which was the code name for the bomb. They're raising it onto the tower where they will blow it up the following night. They're putting the last pieces of it together. They're wiring all the explosives around it. They're putting mattresses under the tower so in case the bomb falls while it's being raised, that it'll fall onto something cushiony. I still don't know how well those mattresses would work out, because what's going to stop Like, what really is going to stop that atomic bomb from going off with all those people around it? Um, they were they were calculating, they were doing last minute calculations on the successive, not the successiveness, the successfulness of the test. And one of the scientists come back after doing an explosive test and says that it failed. So that generated a feeling of anxiety that they were going to fire a dud. But they said, we need to go through with this test. I just know it's going to work. I know this. And they were taking bets on it. They're like, a month of my salary against $10 that it doesn't go off. So Oppenheimer shakes on it. And later on, when the bomb actually goes off, that scientist goes back to Oppenheimer and says, you owe me $10. So anyway, getting back to the soundtrack, each noise, each sound in the orchestra is meant to generate this feeling of anxiety because they were crossing into parts unknown of the physical sciences. And I think the soundtrack is just the cherry on top of this magnificent anxiety-inducing scene. The Los Alamos scientists were also plagued, they were confronted by a hauntingly devastating possibility called atmospheric ignition. So before I explain what the heck that even means, let me explain in the most simplest terms I can find how an atomic bomb even works. So the first atomic bombs utilized the power of nuclear fission. So fission, in the case of the atomic bomb, is when you take, for example, plutonium, a plutonium atom, and you bombard it with subatomic particles called neutrons until that plutonium becomes unstable. And then the plutonium atom literally splits. And then those dissected plutonium atoms smash into other atoms, then those ones split, and so on and so on and so on, releasing devastating amounts of nuclear energy. So the Los Alamos lab scientists wanted to utilize this to their advantage and make a bomb out of it. So they were also living in fear of Nazi Germany making their atomic bombs first. So it really was a race against time. Who was going to make their weapons first and use their weapons first? Now back to atmospheric ignition. So I was talking about how plutonium atoms are bombarded with neutrons. Those atoms split. They crash into other atoms. Those ones split and they smash into others, and so on and so on. So they were worried that when the atomic bomb explodes, the chain reaction within the bomb that makes it explode doesn't stop. So it sets fire to the atmosphere. And the chain reaction carries on and it sets the world on fire, pretty much. So there's a scene with Matt Damon's character, General Groves, and Cillian Murphy as Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer. They're talking together just before the countdown starts for the bomb. And General Groves says, so what did Enrico Fermi mean by atmospheric ignition? And Oppenheimer kind of calmly says, well, we had a moment where it looked like the chain reaction from an atomic device might never stop, setting fire to the atmosphere. And then Groves is like, are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world? And Oppenheimer says, the chances are near zero. And Groves says, near zero? And Oppenheimer says, what do you want from theory alone? And Groves says, zero would be nice. So the whole time this scene is happening, there's serious action going on in the string section in the orchestra that's playing the music for this movie. And again, with the whole anxiety-inducing thing, you're just anticipating, like, you know what's going to happen, but it doesn't take away that anxiety or that stress from like, all right, the bomb's about to go off. It's about to go off. Is it going to set fire to the atmosphere? Is it going to, are they going to fire a dud? What's going to happen? So, just 7 minutes of just straight, noise and chaos. But then all of a sudden, when the music cuts out, the bomb goes off. The scientists they all look like devastated as well as amazed and enthralled by this new weapon that they're about to unleash on the world. So there's like, you can hear breathing and just stunned silence from the scientists as they watch this fireball just rise into the air. And as it dies away, you hear Oppenheimer mutter the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, that has been made famous by Oppenheimer as he describes what was going through his mind during the Trinity test. He says, "And now I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds." Another moment of silence follows that one line of dialogue, and then all of a sudden, you hear this loud as the shockwave from the explosion finally gets to where they are, and the shack that they're huddled up in is just rumbling and rumbling and rumbling, and you hear the scientists like look while they're looking at Oppenheimer, they say, "It worked." So the last scene that I want to talk about comes from the Oppenheimer security hearing, when it becomes quickly apparent that Oppenheimer is being put through an ordeal, and the board that is trying him is clearly against him. Oppenheimer's wife, who I failed to mention this whole time, her name's Catherine, but the entire movie she's known by her nickname, Kitty. She is played by the wonderful Emily Blunt. She doesn't have that many lines in the movie, but whenever she does, she really delivers. She is a ex-communist and retired botanist who gave up her life of science to be a mother to Oppenheimer's children. She was an alcoholic, and she was really a troubled human being, and you see that in the movie, and it just pains me to watch her act in this role. Emily Blunt deserves all the credit due for her role as Dr. Oppenheimer's wife, Catherine. Kitty Oppenheimer did not have an easy life while being married to Dr. Oppenheimer. He was having affairs on the side. While he was at work, she was left at home doing the last thing that she would ever imagine doing, which was being a mother. She had to watch her husband be put through this security hearing where he was being verbally tarred and feathered by the members of the security board, as well as many of the scientists that worked with her husband during their time in Los Alamos, New Mexico. However, all imperfections aside, Kitty deserves she deserves every ounce of recognition, because regardless of her alcoholism, her troubles as a mother, she stood by her husband. And Dr. Oppenheimer acknowledges that when she finally comes in to the security board room to mop the floor with the lawyers and attorneys who are putting her husband through this ordeal. Oppenheimer says, "Kitty and I, we're grown-ups. We've walked through fire together. She'll do fine." So this scene with Kitty Oppenheimer testifying on behalf of her husband gives new meaning to the meme, "Call the ambulance," but not for me, because she's about to smack down with the lawyers and attorneys who are verbally crucifying her husband. So at the beginning of this scene, it seems to me that I'm just gonna, Kitty is putting on the nervous bimbo housewife persona because she speaks very quietly, and they ask her questions like, would you describe your views on communism as pro, anti, or neutral? And she responds like with hands in her purse, just like very strongly against. I've had nothing to do with communism since 1936, since before I met Robert. And then when the lead interrogator takes the stand and asks her if she had had a Communist Party membership card, she still keeps it up and says, like, very quietly, like, I'm not sure. And he's like, well, the act of joining the party required sending some money and receiving a card, no? And immediately there is a switch of power because she turns off the intimidated housewife attitude and immediately just punches back verbally and is like, not really. Long enough to have forgotten. The card whose existence I've forgotten, I haven't the slightest idea. And there's so much candor and sass, and she doesn't hold back showing her contempt for these people who have made a mockery of her husband. In the entire movie, she has been berating Oppenheimer for allowing them to put him through this ordeal. And she's like, you sit there day after day and you let them pick our lives to pieces and you do nothing. Why don't you fight? Why don't you fight, Oppenheimer? Why don't you say something? We're going to lose our house. We'll lose our jobs. Why don't you fight? But in this one scene where she's given a real moment to shine, she shines in all of her scenes on screen. She's fantastic. I love Emily Blunt's job in this movie. But in this one scene, she shows that no matter how much she's berated her husband for cowardice, she still shows that she's willing to come to his defense. So my hat's off to Emily Blunt for delivering a fantastic job as Kitty or Catherine Oppenheimer. And really, the entire cast is just star-studded. And they did a fantastic job with this movie. Anything Christopher Nolan puts out, I just eat it up over and over again. Ludwig Göransson did a incredible, remarkable, magnificent job on the score for Oppenheimer. And I encourage you guys to watch it and watch it again. But please watch it through VidAngel. I mean, I'm all for free speech and freedom to put whatever you want in a movie, but that doesn't take away our freedom to run it through streaming service. So I'm just going to do a quick ad for VidAngel right now. But anyway, Oppenheimer is fantastic. And it's a hauntingly contemplative movie that really makes you stop and think about our world and science. And if you watch this movie as much as I have, and you recite some of the lines, you can actually impress your friends and sound smart. You can tell them how atomic bombs work, and you can use words like atmospheric or fission or fusion, plutonium, whatever. But anyway, you guys, thank you so much for listening to the second episode of the Holland Impact. I look forward to recording episode 3 and sending it out for you guys next time. So until next time, I'm Christian Holland, and I wish you guys well.